The night America forgot to sleep. Imagine this. You are drifting to sleep while a quiet train glides through the endless American frontier. Outside the window, moonlight washes over rivers, forests, and forgotten battlefields. Every hill, every old road, and every silent town holds a true story that once changed history. Tonight, you won't hear explosions or frantic battles. Instead, you'll travel gently through centuries of remarkable real events that shaped the United States. Slow your breathing, settle comfortably, and let history quietly unfold. Long before the United States existed, North America was home to millions of indigenous people. Hundreds of nations flourished across forests, deserts, mountains, and coastlines. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy built a sophisticated political alliance in the Northeast. The Cherokee developed written laws and thriving towns. The Pueblo peoples engineered remarkable settlements from stone and adobe beneath the brilliant desert sun. Along the Mississippi River, descendants of ancient civilizations continued traditions rooted in remarkable cities that had once housed thousands of people. Life followed the rhythm of the seasons. Rivers served as highways. Forests supplied food and shelter. Skilled hunters understood animal migrations, while farmers cultivated corn, beans, and squash together in a system modern scientists still admire for its efficiency. Communities traded copper, shells, obsidian, and precious stones across enormous distances, connecting regions long before European ships crossed the Atlantic. As the centuries passed, powerful winds carried unfamiliar sails toward North America. European explorers arrived searching for wealth, trade routes, and opportunity. Their arrival forever altered the continent. New technologies and new ideas crossed the ocean, but so did devastating diseases that reshaped entire civilizations. Villages that had thrived for generations suddenly faced unimaginable loss, yet history continued quietly onward. English settlers established Jamestown in 1607, struggling through starvation, harsh winters, and uncertainty before tobacco transformed the colony into an economic success. Farther north, families aboard the Mayflower reached New England in 1620, seeking religious freedom. Their first winters tested every ounce of courage they possessed. Survival depended not only upon determination, but also upon assistance from native communities that understood the land far better than the newcomers ever could. As villages slowly became towns, and towns slowly became colonies, ordinary life unfolded in fascinating ways. Blacksmiths shaped glowing iron beneath showers of orange sparks. Bakers filled the cool morning air with warm bread. Children learned lessons inside one-room schoolhouses. Farmers watched weather patterns with careful eyes, knowing that every harvest determined whether families would prosper or struggle during the coming winter. The Atlantic Ocean never truly separated America from Europe. Ships constantly carried letters, news, books, furniture, tools, fabrics, spices, and ideas across thousands of miles. Every voyage required extraordinary navigation using stars, winds, currents, and remarkable courage. Captains relied upon experience passed from one generation to another, long before satellites or modern instruments existed. As decades quietly passed, disagreements slowly emerged between Britain's government and the growing American colonies. Taxes, representation, trade regulations, and political rights became subjects of increasingly passionate discussion. In taverns lit by candles, conversations stretched late into the evening. Farmers, merchants, lawyers, sailors, and craftsmen debated what justice truly meant. Eventually, those conversations transformed history forever. The first whispers of revolution did not sound like thunder. They sounded like ordinary conversations shared over warm cider, fresh bread, and glowing fireplaces on cold colonial evenings. In quiet villages stretching from Massachusetts to Virginia, people gathered after long days of work, discussing letters that had arrived from Boston, Philadelphia, and London. Few could have imagined that these calm discussions would eventually reshape the future of an entire continent. The roads were still rough and often muddy after heavy rain. Horse-drawn wagons rolled slowly beneath towering oak and maple trees, whose branches formed peaceful tunnels overhead. Travelers carried newspapers folded carefully inside leather satchels, protecting precious pages from wind and moisture. Every newspaper was read many times, often aloud to neighbors who could not easily obtain a copy themselves. As the seasons changed, so did the mood throughout the colonies. Small meetings grew larger. Local assemblies welcomed more voices. Farmers paused their work to hear the latest news. Blacksmiths listened while their hammers rested quietly beside glowing forges. Shopkeepers exchanged information with customers who had traveled from distant towns. Meanwhile, the great rivers of North America continued flowing exactly as they always had. The Hudson reflected autumn colors like polished glass. The Delaware drifted peacefully toward the Atlantic Ocean. The Mississippi carried enormous amounts of fresh water southward every single day, just as it had for thousands of years before anyone imagined a nation called the United States. Nature paid little attention to politics. Each sunrise painted the sky with soft shades of gold and pink. White-tailed deer stepped carefully through quiet forests. Eagles circled high above broad valleys. Beavers patiently repaired their dams, while songbirds greeted every new morning with familiar melodies. Life continued. Families planted gardens. Children learned to read. Millers turned grain into flour. Carpenters raised sturdy wooden homes that would shelter several generations beneath the same roof. Many evenings ended with candlelight. Candles themselves were valuable, carefully made from beeswax or animal fat. Their gentle glow illuminated handwritten journals, treasured family Bibles, maps, and personal letters. Every page represented hours of careful work, because paper was expensive and ink required patience to produce. Across the Atlantic Ocean, sailing ships continued arriving after journeys lasting weeks or even months. Their wooden hulls creaked softly as they entered colonial harbors. Sailors unloaded barrels of tea, cloth, books, tools, glassware, and countless everyday necessities. In return, American ports exported timber, tobacco, grain, fish, and other valuable goods that connected the growing colonies to markets throughout Europe. The ports themselves never truly slept. Before sunrise, fishermen prepared sturdy boats for another day upon the water. Dock workers carefully stacked cargo, while merchants inspected inventories with remarkable attention to detail. Rope makers twisted long strands of hemp into thick lines strong enough to hold massive sailing vessels against powerful ocean tides. Every profession mattered. Every skilled hand contributed quietly to the growth of a young society. Far inland, beyond the busiest towns, enormous forests still covered much of the landscape. Wolves wandered silently beneath moonlit skies. Black bears searched for berries near peaceful streams. Countless stars stretched across remarkably dark nights untouched by electric lights. For many travelers, nighttime became a lesson in patience. Without bright lanterns or paved highways, journeys often paused until sunrise. Small roadside inns welcomed weary guests with simple meals, warm fireplaces, and comfortable conversations. Stories passed from traveler to traveler, carrying news faster than official announcements ever could. Some described distant mountains. Others spoke of rich farmland. Some had seen whales beyond the Atlantic coast. Others recalled frozen lakes farther north, where winter seemed almost endless. Each traveler became a living library. Their memories carried history from one community to another. And although political disagreements slowly intensified, ordinary Americans continued living ordinary lives. Weddings filled churches with music. Harvest festivals celebrated successful crops. Families welcomed newborn children, while honoring elderly grandparents whose memories reached back to the earliest colonial settlements. History is often remembered through dramatic moments, yet most of history is actually quiet. It unfolds through countless ordinary mornings, peaceful evenings, careful decisions, and patient work performed by people whose names never appear inside textbooks. Those quiet lives became the foundation upon which an entirely new nation would eventually stand. The winter air arrived gently across the American colonies, carrying the familiar scent of pine forests, wood smoke, and fresh snow. Frost settled quietly upon rooftops before sunrise. while rivers along the northern colonies developed thin sheets of ice that sparkled beneath the first golden light of morning. Farmers rose before dawn to care for their animals, just as their parents and grandparents had done for generations. History often remembers the great speeches and famous battles, but it was these peaceful mornings that truly sustained a growing nation. Inside small wooden homes, fireplaces glowed warmly throughout the day. Iron kettles hung above gentle flames, slowly filling the rooms with the comforting aroma of oatmeal, cornmeal porridge, and freshly baked bread. Children wrapped themselves in thick wool blankets before beginning lessons by candlelight. Many families owned only a handful of books, making every page precious. Reading was slow, thoughtful, and often shared aloud so everyone could learn together. Outside, horses pulled heavy sleds across snow-covered roads where wagons could no longer travel easily. The silence of winter transformed the countryside. Every sound seemed softer. Every footstep disappeared beneath fresh snow. Even the forest seemed to whisper instead of speak. For travelers, winter demanded patience. A journey that required 3 days in summer might take twice as long once snow covered the roads. Inns became welcome islands of warmth scattered across long stretches of wilderness. Travelers gathered beside crackling fireplaces, drying damp coats while exchanging stories from distant towns. One visitor might speak of Philadelphia's busy streets, another of Boston's crowded harbor, while someone else described peaceful farms hidden beyond the Blue Ridge Mountains. No one realized that these conversations quietly connected an entire continent. The colonies themselves were becoming increasingly diverse. English settlers lived beside Dutch merchants, German farmers, Scottish craftsmen, French traders, African laborers, and countless Native American communities whose knowledge of the land remained invaluable. Each culture contributed tradition, recipes, music, languages, and practical skills that slowly blended into a uniquely American identity. Music filled many evenings. Simple violins, wooden flutes, and handcrafted drums accompanied songs passed from one generation to the next. Families gathered after supper not because they possessed great wealth, but because time spent together was among life's greatest treasures. Meanwhile, newspapers continued arriving from town to town. Each edition carried reports from Europe, shipping schedules, crop prices, political debates, and local announcements. A single newspaper might be read dozens of times before the paper itself wore thin. Neighbors gathered inside taverns or meeting halls as skilled readers shared every article aloud, allowing entire communities to stay informed. Beyond the settled town stretched an astonishing wilderness. Towering forests reached for hundreds of miles. Crystal-clear rivers carved their way through rocky valleys. Vast grasslands rolled endlessly beneath open skies, where millions of bison once wandered in enormous herds. Eagles soared above cliffs, while wolves moved silently beneath moonlit trees. Nature remained larger than any colony, larger than any government, and larger than any human ambition. Many explorers recorded their journeys with remarkable detail. They described waterfalls that thundered through deep canyons, mountains whose snowy peaks seemed to touch the heavens, and valleys so fertile they believed generations could thrive there forever. These journals became priceless windows into a continent that still held countless mysteries. As one peaceful season slowly gave way to another, the colonies continued growing, not through sudden change, but through thousands of ordinary moments. A bridge completed across a river shortened travel by hours. A new mill provided flour for neighboring farms. A schoolhouse opened its doors to children eager to learn. A doctor arrived in a village that had never before known permanent medical care. History rarely celebrates these quiet achievements. Yet they shaped daily life just as surely as any famous declaration or battlefield. And so, beneath calm skies and changing seasons, America continued its slow and remarkable journey toward becoming a nation. One careful step, one peaceful sunrise, and one hopeful generation at a time. Spring arrived almost unnoticed. One morning, the frozen streams began to whisper again beneath their blankets of ice. Tiny droplets of water glimmered in the morning sunlight, and within only a few weeks, Fields that had seemed lifeless throughout the long winter slowly awakened with fresh shades of green. Across the American colonies, farmers stepped outside before dawn, breathing deeply as cool air carried the scent of damp earth and blooming apple trees. Horses patiently waited beside wooden fences while robins filled the quiet countryside with cheerful songs. It was a season of beginnings. Seeds disappeared beneath carefully prepared soil, carrying with them the hopes of entire families. Every kernel of corn, every bean, every squash seed represented tomorrow's meals, next winter's survival, and the promise that another year might be a little better than the last. There were no tractors, no diesel engines, no satellites predicting tomorrow's weather. Instead, people watched the clouds. They studied the wind. They remembered the wisdom of parents and grandparents who had learned to read nature with remarkable accuracy. If the morning mist lingered unusually long across the valleys, experienced farmers quietly discussed what it might mean. If birds arrived earlier than expected, they noticed. If oak leaves opened before maple leaves, they remembered. Nature itself became their oldest teacher. Along the eastern coastline, fishing villages also welcomed spring with quiet excitement. Small wooden boats gently rocked against weathered docks, while fishermen repaired worn nets that had served their families for many seasons. Before sunrise, they pushed away from shore. The Atlantic Ocean stretched endlessly before them. The sea appeared peaceful, yet every experienced sailor understood its quiet power. Ocean currents invisible to the eye carried ships across thousands of miles. Sudden storms could appear without warning. Thick fog sometimes surrounded vessels so completely that sailors could barely see the ends of their own decks. Navigation demanded extraordinary skill. Captains relied upon the stars, the position of the sun, magnetic compasses, handwritten charts, and years of practical experience passed from one generation to another. At night, when clouds cleared, the heavens became an enormous map. The North Star remained a trusted guide. Countless constellations quietly pointed experienced navigators toward distant harbors, far inland. Rivers served as America's first highways: the Hudson, the Connecticut, the Potomac, the Ohio, the mighty Mississippi. Each river connected communities separated by forests too dense for easy travel. Flatboats drifted slowly downstream carrying flour, timber, animal hides, tobacco, iron tools, barrels of salted meat, and handwritten letters that families eagerly awaited. A single letter often traveled for weeks before reaching its destination. When it finally arrived, entire households gathered together. Every word mattered. Parents learned that children were healthy. Brothers discovered sisters had married. Grandparents welcomed news of newborn grandchildren they might never meet. Sometimes those letters carried nothing more than everyday stories: a successful harvest, a repaired barn, a favorite horse recovering from illness, simple news. Yet those ordinary details reminded distant families that they remained connected despite enormous distances. As spring gradually became summer, forests transformed into endless seas of green. Towering white pines reached toward blue skies. Massive oak trees cast cool shadows upon winding trails. Wildflowers painted open meadows with brilliant colors that stretched as far as the eye could see. Travelers frequently stopped simply to admire the scenery. Many later wrote that North America's natural beauty seemed almost impossible to describe. Some compared endless forests to green oceans. Others believed the rivers reflected the sky more clearly than polished glass. Even today, many of those landscapes remain astonishingly beautiful. History often celebrates governments, wars, and famous leaders. But another history unfolded quietly every single day. Children laughing beside streams. Neighbors helping repair damaged roofs after spring storms. Young apprentices learning trades from patient masters. Families gathering beneath evening skies filled with thousands of brilliant stars untouched by electric lights. Those peaceful moments rarely appeared inside official records. Yet together, they formed the true rhythm of everyday life in early America, long before the nation became one of the world's great powers. It was simply a collection of ordinary people building homes, raising families, exploring unfamiliar landscapes and dreaming of a brighter future. Night after night, candles slowly burned lower. Morning after morning, the sun faithfully returned. Season after season, America quietly continued writing its remarkable story, not only through extraordinary events, but through millions of gentle, ordinary moments that history would almost forget. As one peaceful summer faded into another golden autumn, the forests of eastern North America became a breathtaking tapestry of color. Brilliant scarlet maples stood beside glowing golden birches, while mighty oak trees slowly exchanged their deep green leaves for warm shades of amber and bronze. Gentle breezes carried fallen leaves across quiet country roads, where horse-drawn wagons rolled at an unhurried pace beneath endless blue skies. For many families, autumn was the busiest season of the entire year. Fields of corn stood tall beneath the afternoon sun. Pumpkins rested like bright orange lanterns among sprawling vines. Apple orchards filled the air with a sweet fragrance that drifted for miles, while baskets overflowed with pears, beans, squash, and freshly harvested vegetables. Every member of the household had a responsibility. Children gathered apples that had fallen during the night. Older brothers stacked firewood into neat piles beside the house. Sisters helped preserve fruit inside glass jars or carefully dried herbs that would flavor winter meals. Parents inspected barns, repaired fences, and prepared livestock for the colder months ahead. These ordinary tasks may have seemed simple, yet they represented centuries of practical knowledge. Every family understood that careful preparation during autumn often determined whether winter would be comfortable or difficult. As daylight gradually grew shorter, evenings became longer and quieter. Inside wooden homes, the warm glow of fireplaces filled every corner with gentle light. Candles flickered softly as grandparents shared stories remembered from their own childhoods. Some tales spoke of distant homelands across the Atlantic Ocean. Others described Native American guides whose remarkable understanding of forests had saved countless explorers from becoming hopelessly lost. Children listened with wide eyes. Outside, the wind whispered through tall pine trees. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called softly across the valley. The stars slowly appeared one by one until the entire sky glittered with countless points of light. Without electric lights, the night sky was astonishing. The Milky Way stretched from horizon to horizon like a river of silver dust. Many travelers later wrote that they had never imagined so many stars could exist. For sailors far out upon the Atlantic Ocean, these same stars remained faithful companions. Merchant ships continued crossing between Europe and North America, carrying not only cargo, but also people whose lives would forever change upon reaching the New World. Among them were skilled craftsmen, school teachers, musicians, physicians, printers, and families seeking opportunities unavailable in their homelands. Each arrival added another thread to the growing fabric of American society. Languages mixed. Recipes evolved. Music blended traditions from many cultures. Communities slowly became more diverse with every passing decade. Meanwhile, Philadelphia quietly emerged as one of the largest and most influential cities in North America. Its busy streets echoed with the sounds of horses, wagons, church bells, and friendly conversations between merchants conducting business from sunrise until evening. Bookshops displayed newly printed volumes filled with scientific discoveries, philosophy, geography, poetry, and practical advice for farmers and craftsmen alike. Printing presses worked tirelessly. Every page they produced carried ideas that traveled much farther than the paper itself. A thoughtful essay printed in Philadelphia might be discussed weeks later inside a tavern hundreds of miles away. A scientific observation published in Boston could inspire curiosity among students in Virginia. Knowledge traveled remarkably well, even in a world without telephones, radios, or the internet. Across the countryside, one-room schoolhouses welcomed children eager to learn reading, writing, arithmetic, and history. Lessons were often simple, books were few, yet teachers understood something timeless. Education was one of the greatest gifts any society could offer its young people. Many students walked several miles each morning regardless of rain, snow, or summer heat. Their classrooms contained little more than wooden benches, chalkboards, handmade maps, and shelves holding carefully treasured books. Still, dreams filled those humble rooms. Some children hoped to become doctors. Others imagined exploring distant frontiers. Some wished simply to own successful farms where future generations could live peacefully. None of them knew exactly what America would become. But quietly, day after day, season after season, they were preparing to build that future with their own hands. History would eventually remember famous leaders, celebrated inventors, and remarkable presidents. Yet the true strength of the young nation rested upon countless ordinary families who greeted every sunrise with hope, worked honestly throughout the day, and ended each evening grateful for another peaceful night beneath the endless American sky. The rhythm of life continued with remarkable patience. Years passed not with sudden leaps, but with the steady turning of the seasons. Snow gave way to spring blossoms. Summer fields ripened beneath warm sunshine. Autumn painted the hillsides with brilliant color before winter gently tucked the countryside beneath quiet blankets of snow once again. For most people living in early America, the passage of time was measured not by calendars hanging upon walls, but by nature itself. The first robin of spring, the return of salmon to northern rivers, the blooming of wildflowers across open meadows, the first crisp morning when frost covered the grass. These familiar signs quietly marked another chapter in life's endless cycle. Before sunrise, villages slowly awakened. A rooster called somewhere beyond a weathered barn. Thin ribbons of smoke curled upward from stone chimneys as families rekindled the morning fire. The smell of fresh bread drifted through cool air while blacksmiths unlocked their workshops and merchants carefully arranged goods outside small wooden stores. There was no rush, no humming automobiles, no buzzing airplanes crossing the sky. Only the gentle sounds of horses, wagon wheels, distant church bells, and neighbors greeting one another with warm smiles. Along the great eastern seaboard, lighthouses had become silent guardians of the coast. Their keepers lived quiet, disciplined lives. Every evening they climbed winding staircases carrying containers of oil to feed enormous lamps whose steady light guided ships safely through darkness. It was lonely work. Storms sometimes isolated lighthouse keepers for weeks. Towering waves crashed against rocky cliffs while fierce winds shook the thick stone walls. Yet each keeper understood that hundreds of sailors depended upon that single beam of light. Many lives were saved because someone faithfully performed a simple task every single night. Far inland, the frontier slowly expanded westward. Families loaded sturdy wagons with everything they owned: wooden furniture, iron cooking pots, blankets sewn by hand, family Bibles, precious photographs, and treasured letters. They traveled not because the journey was easy, but because they hoped to build better futures beyond the mountains. The roads were little more than rough trails. Bridges were rare. Rivers often had to be crossed by ferry or shallow ford. Every mile demanded patience. Still, the wagons continued rolling. Children laughed while chasing butterflies beside campsites. Parents carefully prepared simple meals over open fires. At night, they slept beneath skies brighter than most modern people have ever seen. Without electric lights, the heavens seemed almost endless. The Milky Way stretched across the darkness like a glowing ribbon. Shooting stars occasionally crossed the sky, disappearing almost as quickly as they appeared. Many travelers later wrote that these peaceful nights became their favorite memories of the entire journey, not because they were exciting, but because they felt wonderfully calm. The silence itself became unforgettable. In towns both large and small, craftsmen continued mastering skills that required extraordinary patience. Wheelwrights shaped perfect wooden wagon wheels. Coopers assembled sturdy barrels so tightly that they could carry water without leaking. Silversmiths transformed simple metal into elegant works of art. Clockmakers built intricate mechanisms containing hundreds of tiny parts, each carefully crafted by hand. Nothing was rushed. Every object represented hours, sometimes weeks, of thoughtful work. These craftsmen believed that quality mattered more than speed. It was a lesson quietly passed from master to apprentice across generations. Meanwhile, America's rivers continued carrying life across the continent. Steamboats had not yet transformed transportation. Most cargo still traveled by flatboats, canoes, and sturdy sailing vessels. Boatmen knew every bend in the rivers. They recognized hidden sandbars, swift currents, and dangerous rocks almost by instinct. A journey downstream might take days. Returning upstream could require weeks of determined effort. Yet these waterways connected farms, villages, and growing cities into a living network long before railroads appeared. As evening settled once again across the countryside, families gathered together after another day of honest work. Some read aloud from treasured books. Others quietly mended clothing beside the fire. Children gradually grew sleepy as flames danced gently within the fireplace. Outside, crickets filled the warm night with their peaceful song. The moon slowly climbed above forests that had watched countless generations come and go. Time itself seemed to move more slowly. And perhaps that was history's greatest gift. Not only the remarkable events remembered by books, but also the countless quiet evenings, simple conversations, and ordinary moments that gently shaped a nation, one peaceful day at a time. Morning light slowly spread across the Appalachian Mountains, touching one ridge after another until the entire landscape glowed with soft shades of gold. A gentle mist rested in the valleys below, drifting lazily above winding rivers that had carved their paths through ancient stone for millions of years. Long before roads and railways crossed these mountains, they stood as silent witnesses to every chapter of North American history. The Appalachian Mountains are among the oldest mountain ranges on Earth. Long before the age of dinosaurs, before flowering plants covered the land, and before humans ever walked these forests, these mountains were already rising from the collision of enormous continents. Over hundreds of millions of years, wind, rain, rivers, and winter ice slowly shaped their rugged peaks into the rolling ridges that stretch from present-day Alabama all the way to Newfoundland in Canada. Early travelers often described the mountains with a mixture of admiration and respect. The forests seemed endless. Towering chestnut, oak, hickory, maple, and pine trees formed an immense green canopy overhead. Sunlight filtered gently through thousands of leaves, painting moving patterns upon the forest floor. Small creeks flowed quietly between moss-covered rocks while wildflowers bloomed in tiny clearings hidden deep within the woods. Walking these trails required patience. There were no signs pointing the way, no bridges spanning every stream. Experienced guides relied upon the position of the sun, familiar rock formations, flowing water, and generations of inherited knowledge. Native American nations had traveled these pathways for centuries before European settlers arrived, creating routes that later became some of America's earliest roads. As settlers slowly moved westward, mountain passes became precious gateways connecting distant communities. Pack horses carried flour, salt, iron tools, blankets, books, and medicines through narrow valleys. Every journey demanded endurance. Heavy rains transformed trails into slippery paths. Dense fog often settled across the ridges, hiding even nearby landmarks. During winter, snow could completely close certain mountain routes for weeks, yet people continued traveling, not because it was easy, because curiosity has always been one of humanity's greatest strengths. Many families dreamed of fertile valleys beyond the mountains where they could build homes, raise children, and begin new lives. By midday, sunlight warmed the forests. Woodpeckers tapped patiently against old trees searching for insects beneath the bark. White-tailed deer stepped quietly into grassy meadows before disappearing once more among the shadows. High above, red-tailed hawks circled effortlessly upon rising currents of warm air, watching the valleys below with remarkable eyesight. The natural world followed rhythms unchanged for countless generations. Spring brought fresh leaves. Summer filled the forests with life. Autumn painted every hillside in brilliant reds, oranges, and gold. Winter wrapped everything in peaceful silence. These same seasons guided the lives of those who called the mountains home. Log cabins stood beside clear streams where fresh water flowed year-round. Smoke drifted gently from stone chimneys each morning. Families planted small gardens, tended orchards, hunted responsibly, gathered wild berries, and preserved food carefully for the colder months ahead. Life demanded hard work. but it also offered extraordinary beauty. Evenings often ended on simple wooden porches overlooking quiet valleys. Parents watched children play while the setting sun slowly disappeared beyond distant ridges. As darkness arrived, countless stars emerged above the mountains with astonishing clarity. Without the glow of modern cities, the heavens appeared almost endless. Travelers frequently paused just to admire the night sky. Some later wrote that they had never experienced such complete peace. The only sounds were gentle breezes moving through the trees, distant owls calling across the hills, and streams continuing their endless journey toward larger rivers. Those rivers eventually carried mountain water to the mighty Mississippi, to the Great Lakes, and finally to the Atlantic Ocean. Everything was connected. Every drop of rain, every winding creek, every quiet valley. History often focuses on great cities and famous leaders, but the mountains tell another story, a slower story of endurance, patience, and harmony with nature. Generation after generation lived here, learned here, and passed their knowledge to those who followed. And as another calm evening settled across the Appalachian wilderness, the forests remained exactly as they had for centuries, peaceful, timeless, and quietly watching history continue its gentle journey beneath the endless American sky. As the first light of dawn faded behind the Appalachian Mountains, another world slowly awakened far to the west. Beyond the forests and winding rivers lay an inland sea so vast that early explorers often believed they had reached the edge of the world once again. These were the Great Lakes: Superior, Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario. Together, they hold nearly one-fifth of all the fresh surface water on Earth, an astonishing fact that continues to amaze scientists today. Their shorelines stretch for thousands of miles, touching quiet forests, rocky cliffs, sandy beaches, and peaceful harbors that have welcomed travelers for centuries. On a calm summer morning, the surface of Lake Superior can appear perfectly still, reflecting the sky with such clarity that the horizon almost disappears. The silence is profound. Gentle waves lap softly against smooth stones polished by thousands of years of moving water, but those who knew the lakes understood their hidden power. Without warning, calm weather could transform into towering waves driven by fierce winds. Dense fog could blanket the water so completely that nearby boats vanished into white silence. Many experienced captains compared the Great Lakes to inland oceans, demanding the same respect as the Atlantic itself. Long before European maps included these waters, indigenous nations had traveled them in beautifully crafted birch-bark canoes. These remarkable vessels were lightweight, flexible, and perfectly suited for long journeys. Families crossed wide bays. Traders carried copper, furs, medicines, and carefully crafted tools between distant communities. Messengers paddled for days, guided by the stars, the shoreline, and generations of inherited knowledge. Every journey strengthened connections across an enormous landscape. As time passed, French explorers and fur traders arrived, following rivers that eventually opened into these vast freshwater lakes. Simple trading posts gradually grew into small settlements. Wooden docks extended into quiet harbors. Warehouses stored valuable cargo awaiting transport. Shipbuilders learned how to craft larger vessels capable of carrying timber, grain, iron ore, and supplies across hundreds of miles of open water. The lakes slowly became one of North America's greatest transportation networks. Every season carried its own unique beauty. Spring melted thick winter ice, filling rivers with sparkling water. Summer brought long daylight hours when fishermen rose before sunrise, their boats drifting peacefully through cool morning mist. Autumn transformed the surrounding forests into breathtaking landscapes of crimson, gold, and fiery orange reflected upon the calm surface of the lakes. Then winter arrived once again. Ice slowly formed along quiet bays. Snow covered forests with soft white blankets. Entire harbors sometimes froze solid, bringing shipping to a gentle pause until spring returned. The rhythm never hurried. Nature decided the schedule. Along the shoreline, lighthouses stood watch over rocky points and narrow channels. Their powerful lamps swept slowly across the darkness every night, offering reassurance to captains navigating unfamiliar waters. Many lighthouse keepers lived with only occasional visitors. Weeks might pass without seeing another face beyond family members. Yet they faithfully polished enormous glass lenses, trimmed lamp wicks, and maintained precise records of weather conditions, wind direction, and passing ships. Quiet dedication became their way of life. In nearby towns, children attended school while parents worked in sawmills, fisheries, farms, and small workshops. Church bells echoed gently across the water every Sunday morning. Markets filled with fresh fish, handmade furniture, woven baskets, maple syrup, and warm bread carried from nearby bakeries. Neighbors greeted one another by name. Life moved at a peaceful pace. As evening approached, the setting sun painted the lakes with shimmering shades of pink, orange, and deep purple. Loons called softly across quiet bays. Gentle breezes carried the clean scent of pine forests mixed with cool freshwater. One by one, stars appeared overhead until the heavens stretched endlessly across the tranquil sky. Many travelers later wrote that no palace, no city, and no monument had ever brought them the same sense of calm as sitting quietly beside one of the Great Lakes at sunset. History often remembers the explorers who first mapped these waters. Yet the lakes themselves tell a quieter story, a story of patient fishermen, faithful lighthouse keepers, skilled canoe builders. Curious children skipping stones along the shoreline, families gathering around evening fires while listening to gentle waves reaching the beach. These ordinary moments, repeated across countless generations, became part of America's enduring history. And as the moon slowly climbed above the still waters, the Great Lakes reflected its silver light just as they had for thousands of years, peaceful, timeless, and quietly carrying the memories of everyone who had ever crossed their remarkable shores. The moon slowly disappeared beyond the western horizon, and another peaceful morning arrived over the vast American prairie. Long before fences divided the land and long before highways stretched from coast to coast, these endless grasslands rolled across the heart of North America like a living ocean. Standing upon the prairie at sunrise was unlike standing anywhere else on Earth. There were no towering mountains to interrupt the horizon, no crowded cities filled with noise. Only an immense landscape where the sky seemed almost limitless. As the first rays of sunlight spread across the tall grasses, millions of tiny drops of dew sparkled like countless diamonds. Gentle breezes created slow, graceful waves that moved across the prairie, making the grass appear almost like water upon a calm sea. For thousands of years, indigenous nations including the Lakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho, Comanche, Blackfeet, Pawnee, and many others called these remarkable grasslands home. Their understanding of the prairie was extraordinary. They knew where fresh water could always be found, which plants provided medicine, how weather changed with the seasons, and where enormous herds of bison traveled throughout the year. Nothing was wasted. Every resource was respected. The prairie offered food, clothing, shelter, and tools to those who understood its rhythms. Perhaps no animal symbolized early North America more than the American bison. Before the 19th century, historians estimate that tens of millions of bison roamed the continent. Travelers often described herds stretching so far into the distance that they disappeared beyond the horizon. Their steady movement shaped the grasslands themselves, helping create one of the richest ecosystems on Earth. Morning after morning, these magnificent animals grazed peacefully beneath open skies. Calves remained close beside their mothers. Powerful bulls stood watch over the herd. Birds rested upon their broad backs, feeding on insects stirred from the tall grass. Nature moved together in quiet balance. Prairie dogs built remarkable underground towns connected by countless tunnels. Coyotes wandered patiently through the grass searching for small prey. Pronghorn antelope, among the fastest land animals in North America, crossed the plains with astonishing speed and effortless grace. High overhead, hawks and golden eagles floated silently upon warm air currents, their sharp eyes scanning the landscape far below. Then came the wind. Visitors often remembered the prairie wind for the rest of their lives. Sometimes it whispered gently through the grass. Sometimes it carried the scent of distant rain. Other days it arrived with tremendous strength, racing across hundreds of miles without meeting a single mountain or forest to slow its journey. Yet even powerful winds eventually faded into remarkable silence. As afternoon warmed the plains, wildflowers painted the landscape with brilliant colors: purple coneflowers, golden sunflowers, blue lupins, scarlet Indian paintbrush. Nature transformed the prairie into a living tapestry that changed week by week throughout the growing season. For early explorers crossing these endless grasslands, patience became essential. Distances were difficult to judge. A distant grove of trees might require an entire day's travel to reach. Mirages shimmered above the warm earth, making pools of water appear where none actually existed. Experienced guides relied upon stars, rivers, familiar hills, and careful observation rather than distant landmarks. At night, the prairie became something entirely different. Without mountains or forests, the horizon stretched in every direction beneath an astonishing sky filled with countless stars. The Milky Way arched overhead with breathtaking clarity. Shooting stars occasionally crossed the darkness, leaving brief trails of silver light before disappearing forever. Campfires flickered softly in the cool evening air. Families gathered together after long days of travel. Some quietly prepared simple meals, others repaired clothing, sharpened tools, or simply sat in peaceful silence while listening to crickets and the gentle movement of grass in the night breeze. There was no hurry. Only the comforting rhythm of another day gently coming to an end. Many journals written by travelers across the American prairie mention not fear, but wonder. They spoke of feeling small beneath the enormous sky. They described sunsets that painted the entire western horizon in brilliant shades of crimson, gold, lavender, and deep blue. They remembered nights so quiet that they could hear the distant calls of coyotes echoing across the open land for miles. Those peaceful moments remained with them long after their journeys ended. History often tells the story of the prairie through maps, settlements, and expanding frontiers. But the prairie itself tells a gentler story, a story of endless skis, patient rivers, graceful wildlife, changing seasons, and generations of people who learned that true greatness is often found not in noise or speed, but in the quiet beauty of the natural world. As another calm night settled across the grasslands, the stars shone above the prairie exactly as they had for countless centuries, silently watching history continue beneath their timeless light. As the prairie slowly disappeared behind the travelers, the land began to change once again. The endless grass gave way to rolling hills, then rugged cliffs, and finally to one of the greatest rivers in North American history, the mighty Mississippi. Long before America became a nation, the Mississippi River had already been flowing for countless thousands of years. Beginning far to the north at the quiet waters of Lake Itasca in present-day Minnesota, it traveled more than 2,300 miles before reaching the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico. Along its journey, it gathered water from hundreds of rivers and streams, creating one of the largest river systems on Earth. To early travelers, the Mississippi was far more than a river. It was a lifeline. It connected distant communities, carried food and supplies, and opened pathways through an enormous continent that had few reliable roads. At sunrise, the river often appeared wrapped in a gentle blanket of mist. Tall cottonwood trees stood silently along the banks, their reflections dancing upon calm water, disturbed only by the occasional splash of a fish. Great blue herons waited patiently in the shallows, while bald eagles watched from towering branches high above. The river itself never hurried. It simply continued its ancient journey southward, one quiet bend at a time. For thousands of years, Native American nations built villages along its fertile banks. Rich soil, renewed each year by seasonal floods, made farming possible on a remarkable scale. Corn, beans, squash, and sunflowers flourished in the warm climate, supporting thriving communities whose trade networks stretched across much of the continent. Centuries before European explorers arrived, remarkable cities had already risen along the Mississippi Valley. One of the greatest was Cahokia, located near present-day St. Louis. At its height around the 12th century, it was one of the largest urban centers north of Mexico, with thousands of residents, towering earthen mounds, bustling marketplaces, and skilled craftsmen. Today, many visitors are surprised to learn that such an advanced city existed so long ago. History still holds many quiet surprises. As European explorers gradually reached the Mississippi, they marveled at its size. French explorers carefully mapped long sections of the river, naming landmarks and establishing trading posts that later grew into important towns. Canoes carrying furs drifted alongside larger boats transporting flour, timber, and supplies between distant settlements. The river became a moving road. Instead of horses pulling wagons, the current itself carried travelers southward. A downstream journey could take days or weeks, depending on weather and water levels. Returning upstream was much more difficult. Before the arrival of steamboats, crews often pushed heavy boats against the current using long poles, ropes, and extraordinary determination. Every mile demanded patience. As afternoon sunlight warmed the broad waters, children living along the riverbanks often skipped smooth stones across the surface, laughing as each stone bounced farther than the last. Fishermen quietly repaired their nets beneath the shade of willow trees. Farmers loaded barrels of grain onto waiting boats, while merchants carefully recorded every shipment in thick leather-bound ledgers. Life moved with the rhythm of the river. Floods came. The waters rose. Then they slowly receded, leaving behind rich soil that nourished future harvests. People learned not to fight the river, but to understand it. As evening approached, the sky filled with soft shades of orange and lavender reflected perfectly upon the broad water. The sounds of the day gradually faded. A paddle dipped gently into the river. A distant bird called across the wetlands. Somewhere beyond the trees, frogs began their nightly chorus. Campfires appeared one by one along the shoreline, their warm light flickering against the darkness. Travelers gathered together after another peaceful day, sharing simple meals of fresh fish, cornbread, and vegetables grown nearby. Conversations were quiet. Stories passed from one generation to another. Some spoke of remarkable places farther north. Others dreamed of reaching New Orleans, where ships from across the world arrived carrying languages, music, and traditions from distant continents. Above them all, countless stars slowly emerged once more. The Mississippi reflected those stars just as faithfully as it reflected the morning sun. For thousands of years it had carried canoes, trading boats, explorers, families, dreamers, and ordinary people searching for new beginnings. It asked for nothing. It simply flowed onward. And perhaps that is why the Mississippi has always inspired those who stood upon its banks. Its quiet strength reminds us that history is rarely built in a single dramatic moment. More often, it is shaped slowly, patiently, like a great river that never stops moving, gently carrying every generation toward the future while never forgetting the past. The gentle current of the Mississippi eventually carried countless travelers toward one of the most fascinating cities in early American history, New Orleans. Long before sunrise, the city stirred quietly beneath a warm southern sky. Soft fog drifted above the river while the first rays of light reflected from the water, turning the broad Mississippi into a ribbon of shimmering gold. Ships rested peacefully at their docks, their tall masts standing like silent forests against the brightening horizon. Unlike many settlements farther north, New Orleans possessed a rhythm entirely its own. French, Spanish, African, Caribbean, and Native American traditions blended together in remarkable harmony. The city became a meeting place where languages mixed naturally in busy markets, where recipes combined flavors from distant continents, and where music quietly evolved into something the world had never heard before. Walking through the narrow streets during the early morning was a peaceful experience. Wooden shutters slowly opened. Bakery ovens filled the air with the comforting aroma of fresh bread. Merchants swept the stone sidewalks in front of their shops. Garden courtyards overflowed with jasmine, magnolia, and flowering vines whose fragrance drifted gently through the warm air. The famous balconies, decorated with intricate wrought iron designs, cast graceful shadows across the streets below. They remain one of the city's most recognizable features even today. Horse-drawn carts rolled carefully over cobblestone streets, while riverboats unloaded barrels of flour, cotton, sugar, coffee, spices, and timber from distant parts of the continent. Every crate told a story. Some had traveled hundreds of miles down the Mississippi. Others had crossed the Atlantic Ocean. Still others had arrived from islands in the Caribbean, carrying tropical fruits and unfamiliar spices that fascinated local cooks. The marketplace became the heart of daily life. Farmers displayed baskets filled with vegetables picked only hours earlier. Fishermen offered fresh catches from nearby rivers and coastal waters. Craftsmen proudly arranged handmade furniture, woven baskets, leather goods, and finely crafted tools. Neighbors greeted one another warmly, exchanging stories about the weather, river conditions, and relatives living in distant towns. There was no need to hurry. Business unfolded through conversation, trust, and patience. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, gentle breezes drifted inland from the Gulf of Mexico, bringing welcome relief from the southern warmth. Children played beneath enormous live oak trees, whose twisting branches stretched wide across parks and quiet squares. Some of these remarkable trees were already centuries old, quietly witnessing generations of families grow, celebrate, and eventually pass their stories to those who followed. Birdsong echoed through the shaded streets. Water trickled softly from old fountains. The city breathed calmly. When evening arrived, another remarkable transformation began. Gas lamps gradually illuminated the streets with a warm golden glow. Restaurants and gathering places welcomed families and travelers alike. Simple melodies floated through open windows as musicians practiced familiar tunes. Over time, these musical traditions would help shape entirely new styles of American music, including jazz, which would one day influence artists across the globe. Yet in these early years, it was simply neighbors sharing songs after another honest day's work. The Mississippi remained only a short walk away. Its broad waters reflected both moonlight and lantern light, moving steadily toward the Gulf exactly as they had for thousands of years. Steamboats would later become famous symbols of this great river, but even before their arrival, the waterfront was alive with quiet purpose. Dock workers secured ropes, captains reviewed maps. Sailors checked supplies before tomorrow's departure. Everything was done carefully. Everything had its time. As midnight approached, the city gradually settled into silence. Only the distant sound of flowing water remained. Somewhere, a lighthouse cast its faithful beam across the dark horizon. Somewhere else, a watchman quietly walked the sleeping streets, ensuring that families rested peacefully until morning. History often remembers New Orleans for dramatic events, great celebrations, and extraordinary music. But beneath those famous stories lies another, quieter history. The history of bakers rising before dawn, gardeners tending flowers that perfumed entire neighborhoods, boat builders shaping sturdy vessels by hand, teachers opening small classrooms each morning, children laughing beneath ancient oak trees, ordinary lives woven together into the remarkable story of one of America's most unforgettable cities. And as another peaceful night embraced New Orleans, the warm southern breeze continued to carry the scent of magnolia blossoms across the quiet streets, while the timeless Mississippi flowed onward beneath a sky filled with countless stars, gently reminding every traveler that history is often at its most beautiful when it unfolds in silence. Leaving the warm southern air behind, let us now travel quietly toward the northeastern coastline, where the Atlantic Ocean meets rugged cliffs, peaceful harbors, and villages that have greeted the sunrise for hundreds of years. The journey is long, but there is no need to hurry. Our path follows old roads once traveled by merchants, schoolteachers, ministers, fishermen, and families searching for new opportunities. Every mile carries us through landscapes that change almost without notice. The broad rivers of the South become rolling hills. Forests of oak and pine gradually give way to rocky shorelines where the scent of salt fills the cool morning air. By the time the first light appears, we arrive in a small New England fishing village. The harbor is perfectly still. Dozens of wooden boats rest quietly upon the water, gently rising and falling with each slow wave. Their reflections shimmer beneath a sky painted with pale shades of blue, lavender, and soft gold. A lone bell rings in the distance. One by one, fishermen leave their homes, warmly dressed against the cool ocean breeze. They greet one another with familiar smiles and quiet voices, careful not to disturb the peaceful silence of the early morning. The Atlantic has always demanded respect. It could provide an abundant catch one day and fierce storms the next. Experienced captains learned never to underestimate its power. They watched the clouds carefully, studied the direction of the wind, and paid close attention to the movement of seabirds, whose behavior often hinted at changing weather long before any storm became visible. The boats move away from the harbor slowly. Wooden oars dip gently into the water. The only sounds are the cries of gulls overhead and the soft splash of the sea against weathered hulls. Far beyond the harbor, whales occasionally surface, releasing graceful columns of mist into the cool morning air before quietly disappearing beneath the waves once again. For generations, these waters supported countless communities. Fishing was never simply an occupation. It was a tradition passed from parents to children, from grandparents to grandchildren. Every knot tied in a fishing net, every sail repaired by hand, and every lesson about reading the sea became part of a living history carried across centuries. Back on shore, village life awakens slowly. A baker removes warm loaves from a brick oven, filling the streets with the comforting aroma of fresh bread. A cooper carefully shapes oak staves into sturdy barrels that will soon hold salted fish for long voyages. Children carrying small books walk toward a one-room schoolhouse, their laughter echoing softly through the crisp morning air. Nearby, a lighthouse stands proudly upon a rocky cliff overlooking the endless Atlantic. Its white tower has guided countless ships safely home. The lighthouse keeper begins another ordinary day. He polishes the great glass lens until it sparkles in the sunlight. He checks the supply of lamp oil. He records the weather in a neatly written journal. Most days are peaceful. Few people notice his work. Yet every sailor crossing these waters is grateful for the faithful light that appears each evening without fail. As autumn arrives, New England becomes one of the most colorful places in North America. Maple forests burst into brilliant shades of crimson and orange. Golden birch leaves shimmer in the afternoon sun. Cool breezes carry the scent of pine needles, fallen leaves, and distant wood smoke. Families gather apples from old orchards planted by earlier generations. Others collect pumpkins, squash, and cranberries, preparing carefully for another long winter. Evenings arrive earlier now. Fireplaces glow warmly inside sturdy homes built to withstand fierce coastal storms. Families sit together reading books, mending clothing, carving wooden tools, or simply listening to the crackling fire while rain taps gently upon the windows. Outside, the ocean continues its endless rhythm. The tides rise. The tides fall. The waves patiently smooth every stone along the shoreline. For thousands upon thousands of years, they have repeated this quiet work without ever asking for recognition. Perhaps that is why the Atlantic coast has always inspired reflection. Standing upon those rocky cliffs, watching the endless horizon, many travelers wrote that they felt both wonderfully small and deeply connected to something far greater than themselves. History, after all, is much like the sea. It is shaped not only by great storms and dramatic moments, but also by countless gentle waves that quietly change the shoreline, one tide at a time. And so, as darkness slowly settles over the peaceful harbor, the lighthouse once again sends its warm beam across the sleeping ocean. The boats rest safely at their moorings. The village grows quiet. The stars appear one by one above the Atlantic. And another calm night becomes another page in America's long and beautiful story, written softly by the sea, the wind, and the ordinary people who found their home along its timeless shores. As another peaceful night slipped quietly into dawn, our journey continued farther inland, following narrow dirt roads that wound through gentle valleys and rolling farmland. The cool morning air carried the scent of fresh hay, damp earth, and blooming wildflowers. A thin layer of mist rested over quiet streams, while the first rays of sunlight slowly painted old red barns and white farmhouses with a warm golden glow. For much of early American history, Nearly 9 out of every 10 people lived in rural communities. Cities were important, but farms were the nation's true foundation. Every loaf of bread, every wooden table, every wool blanket, and nearly every meal began with the careful work of families who rose before sunrise and finished their days long after the evening stars appeared. The day always began quietly. Before breakfast, farmers stepped outside to greet the morning. They listened, not to machines, not to traffic, but to nature, the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze, the cheerful songs of meadowlarks, the distant lowing of cattle, the steady crow of a rooster welcoming another day. These familiar sounds formed the heartbeat of the countryside. Nearby, horses patiently waited beside sturdy wooden fences. For centuries they had been trusted companions, helping plow fields, pull wagons, carry travelers, and transport harvests from distant fields back to the family barn. A good horse was valued not simply for its strength, but also for its calm nature and dependable spirit. Many families knew every horse by name. Beyond the barns stretched fields that changed beautifully with each season. In spring, young green shoots covered the land like soft velvet. During summer, waves of corn swayed beneath bright blue skies while wheat fields shimmered like oceans of gold. Autumn brought the excitement of harvest. Neighbors worked together, helping one another gather crops before the first frost arrived. It was common for entire communities to share tools, labor, and even meals. If one family faced illness or hardship, nearby farms often appeared with wagons full of firewood, vegetables, flour, or freshly baked bread. Kindness traveled quickly through the countryside, not because anyone expected reward, but because everyone understood that difficult seasons eventually visit every household. Inside the farmhouse, another quiet rhythm unfolded. Fresh butter was churned by hand. Cheese aged patiently inside cool cellars. Fruit preserved in glass jars lined sturdy wooden shelves, carefully prepared months earlier for the long winter ahead. Children learned practical skills from an early age. Some gathered eggs each morning. Others carried water from nearby wells. Older children helped repair fences, care for livestock, and tend family gardens. Their lessons came not only from books, but from daily life itself. The pace remained wonderfully slow. A letter from relatives hundreds of miles away might require several weeks to arrive. News traveled with travelers, stagecoaches, and riverboats. There was time to think, time to observe, time to notice small details often overlooked in modern life. Clouds drifting peacefully overhead, butterflies resting upon wildflowers, the changing songs of birds as one season quietly replaced another. As afternoon sunlight softened, country roads welcomed familiar visitors. A traveling blacksmith might stop to repair broken tools. A schoolteacher returning home waved warmly to every passing wagon. Doctors sometimes traveled many miles on horseback to visit isolated families, carrying simple medical instruments carefully packed inside sturdy leather bags. Every journey required patience. Every mile strengthened the bonds between neighboring communities. When evening finally arrived, the countryside became especially peaceful. Lanterns glowed softly inside farmhouse windows. Smoke drifted lazily upward from stone chimneys. Families gathered around sturdy wooden tables to share simple meals prepared from the very land surrounding their homes. After supper, some read aloud from treasured books. Others quietly played fiddles, sang familiar songs, or simply enjoyed comfortable silence together. Outside, fireflies appeared among the tall grasses, blinking gently like tiny floating lanterns. Crickets began their evening chorus. A cool breeze carried the sweet fragrance of freshly cut hay across the fields. Above it all, the stars slowly emerged once more. Without the bright lights of modern cities, the night sky stretched from one horizon to the other in breathtaking clarity. Many children fell asleep, while listening to grandparents describe constellations that had guided sailors, explorers, and travelers for countless generations. Those same stars watched over every farmhouse, every quiet road, every peaceful valley. History often remembers America's great inventions, remarkable leaders, and extraordinary achievements. Yet beneath every famous story lived millions of ordinary families whose patient work fed a growing nation. They planted trees whose shade they might never enjoy. They built barns strong enough for future generations. They taught children lessons of honesty, perseverance, gratitude, and kindness. Their names may not appear in history books, but their quiet lives became the roots from which America's future steadily grew. And as another gentle breeze moved across the moonlit fields, the countryside settled peacefully into sleep, ready to welcome another sunrise with the same quiet hope that had carried generations before them. By the middle of the 19th century, a quiet transformation was beginning to unfold across the United States. It did not happen all at once, and for many Americans, daily life remained much the same. Farmers still greeted the sunrise from their fields. Fishermen still watched the tides. Shopkeepers still swept the wooden sidewalks outside their stores before opening for the day. Yet, little by little, a new sound began to echo across the landscape. It was the distant whistle of a steam locomotive. At first, many people had never seen one. Some heard stories from travelers who spoke of remarkable iron machines that could pull dozens of heavy cars across the countryside without horses. Others dismissed such stories as exaggerations. But soon, the evidence arrived. New railroad tracks slowly stretched across forests, rivers, valleys, and open plains, linking communities that had once seemed impossibly far apart. Building a railroad required extraordinary patience. Before a single train could travel, surveyors walked countless miles, carefully measuring the land. Engineers studied rivers, hills, and mountains, searching for routes that would allow trains to climb gentle slopes instead of dangerous ones. Thousands of laborers then followed. With pickaxes, shovels, wheelbarrows, and determination, they cleared forests, moved earth, blasted tunnels through solid rock, and laid heavy wooden railroad ties one after another. Each iron rail was lifted into place by hand. Every spike was driven with powerful swings of a hammer. The work was exhausting. Yet day after day, the tracks slowly reached farther west. Entire towns celebrated when the first train finally arrived. Children waved excitedly. Shopkeepers decorated their windows. Church bells rang joyfully. The arrival of the railroad often meant fresh opportunities, new businesses, easier travel, and quicker communication with distant relatives. Still, despite the excitement, train travel itself possessed a surprisingly gentle rhythm. Passengers climbed aboard polished wooden coaches furnished with comfortable seats and large windows. As the locomotive slowly gathered speed, the steady sound of steel wheels rolling over iron rails became almost hypnotic. Click, clack, click, clack. Hour after hour, that peaceful rhythm accompanied travelers through changing landscapes. Dense forests gradually opened into broad meadows. Rolling farmland gave way to sparkling rivers. Small villages appeared and quietly disappeared beyond the windows. Smoke drifted softly from farmhouse chimneys. Children paused their games to wave at passing trains. Farmers briefly looked up from their work before returning to the familiar rhythm of the day. Inside the train, conversations remained calm. Some passengers quietly read newspapers. Others wrote letters, while the gentle movement of the carriage rocked them almost like a cradle. Many simply gazed through the windows, watching America slowly unfold mile after mile. Dining cars served warm coffee, fresh bread, hearty soups, roasted meats, and homemade pies. The meals were simple, yet comforting. Strangers often became friends while sharing stories over supper. A teacher traveling to a new school might meet a carpenter searching for work in another state. A young family beginning a new chapter in life might sit beside an elderly couple returning to visit grandchildren after many years apart. Every passenger carried a story. Every journey became part of a much larger one. Outside, wildlife continued much as it always had. White-tailed deer lifted their heads as trains passed quietly through forest clearings. Flocks of geese crossed autumn skies in graceful formations. Rivers continued flowing beneath sturdy railroad bridges, reflecting both clouds above and locomotives crossing overhead. Nature adapted slowly. Human progress moved forward. Both continued side by side. As evening approached, the conductor walked calmly through the coaches, lighting elegant oil lamps that cast a warm golden glow across polished wood interiors. The steady rhythm of the wheels became even more soothing in the quiet darkness. Many travelers closed their eyes. Some drifted peacefully to sleep while the train continued its patient journey beneath countless stars. Outside the windows, distant towns shimmered softly with scattered lanterns. Lighthouses guarded coastlines. Farmhouses rested beneath ancient oak trees. Mountains stood silently beneath the moon. America itself seemed to breathe slowly. The railroad changed the nation forever. It carried families toward new homes. It delivered books to schools, medicines to remote villages, fresh food to growing cities, and letters that reunited loved ones separated by great distances. Yet perhaps its greatest gift was something less obvious. It reminded people that an enormous country could feel just a little smaller, that strangers could become neighbors, that ideas could travel as surely as people, and that every peaceful journey, no matter how ordinary it seemed, quietly became another thread woven into the remarkable story of America. As the locomotive's whistle echoed gently across the sleeping countryside and faded into the distance, another calm night settled over the land, while the stars above continued watching the rails stretch toward horizons that seemed to have no end. The steady rhythm of the railroad carried us onward through the quiet hours of the night, until the first pale light of dawn revealed another remarkable chapter of America's story. Ahead lay the vast Rocky Mountains. Unlike the gentle, ancient ridges of the Appalachians, the Rockies rose boldly into the sky. Snow-covered peaks reached more than 14,000 feet above sea level, catching the first rays of sunlight long before the valleys below awakened. Their jagged cliffs, carved by glaciers over millions of years, stood like silent guardians across the western landscape. Long before railroads, long before wagon trails, and long before European explorers crossed these mountains, indigenous peoples had already learned their hidden pathways. For countless generations they understood where mountain streams flowed even during dry summers. They knew which valleys filled first with spring wildflowers. They recognized the calls of animals, the changing winds, and the safest passes through towering peaks. Their knowledge came not from books, but from careful observation passed lovingly from one generation to the next. As the morning grew brighter, golden sunlight spread across alpine meadows covered with tiny blue lupins, Indian paintbrush, and bright yellow alpine sunflowers. Crystal-clear streams rushed over smooth stones, carrying fresh snowmelt toward rivers far below. The water was astonishingly cold. Even on warm summer afternoons, it reminded travelers that winter still lingered high above among the snowy summits. The air itself felt different here. Cool, crisp, wonderfully clean. Every deep breath carried the scent of pine forests, spruce trees, and fresh mountain earth. Many travelers later wrote that simply standing quietly among the Rockies filled them with a sense of peace they had never experienced anywhere else. Elk grazed calmly in wide mountain valleys. Bighorn sheep balanced effortlessly upon steep rocky ledges that seemed impossible to climb. Golden eagles circled high above the cliffs, carried effortlessly by invisible currents of warm air. Occasionally, a black bear wandered quietly through berry bushes, paying little attention to distant travelers. Nature continued according to its own timeless rhythm. As our imaginary journey follows a narrow mountain trail, we pass a small log cabin standing beside a rushing creek. Smoke rises gently from its stone chimney. Outside, neatly stacked firewood waits beneath a simple wooden shelter. A small vegetable garden grows beside the cabin, protected from curious deer by a carefully built fence. Life in the mountains demanded preparation. Winters could be long. Snow sometimes covered the higher valleys for months. Families stored flour, beans, dried fruit, smoked meat, and firewood well before the first heavy snowfall arrived. Every task completed during summer became a quiet promise of comfort during winter. Inside the cabin, handmade quilts rested upon sturdy wooden beds. Shelves held carefully preserved jars of berries, peaches, and vegetables. A cast-iron stove warmed the room while a kettle quietly simmered, filling the air with the comforting scent of herbal tea gathered from nearby meadows. Books, though few, were treasured. Each page was read slowly, each story remembered, Evenings often ended with gentle conversation, while the wind whispered softly through towering pines outside. As the years passed, mountain towns slowly appeared. Some grew around mining camps where prospectors searched hopefully for gold, silver, or copper. Others developed beside mountain rivers, where sawmills transformed towering trees into lumber for homes, schools, churches, and bridges across the expanding nation. Despite these changes, the mountains themselves remained patient. Storms came and went. Snow accumulated each winter before melting each spring. Ancient glaciers continued their slow work of shaping valleys that would outlive every generation living among them. By late afternoon, soft clouds gathered around the highest peaks. Sunlight filtered through them in long golden beams, illuminating distant valleys with breathtaking beauty. Travelers often paused here, not because they were tired, but because the landscape invited quiet reflection. There was no need to rush through such beauty. As evening gently approached, the sky gradually changed from bright blue to warm shades of amber, rose, and deep violet. The snowy mountaintops glowed briefly with the last light of the day before slowly fading into soft twilight. One by one, stars appeared once again above the Rockies. The mountain air grew cooler. The forests became still. A distant owl called across the valley. Nearby, the steady sound of the creek continued its endless journey toward rivers below. It was the same sound heard by indigenous travelers centuries earlier, the same sound heard by explorers, settlers, naturalists, and families who later called these mountains home. History had changed. Empires had risen and fallen. Technologies had transformed daily life. Yet the mountain stream continued flowing exactly as it always had. Perhaps that is one of history's quietest lessons. Human lives may be brief, but the landscapes that shelter us often carry memories far older than any written page. And beneath the endless stars of the American West, the Rocky Mountains stood in peaceful silence, watching another gentle night settle over a land that had inspired wonder for countless generations. The following morning arrived with extraordinary calm. High above the Rocky Mountains, the first rays of sunlight touched the snowy peaks, while the valleys below still rested beneath a blanket of cool blue shadow. Tiny streams sparkled like ribbons of silver as they hurried downhill, eventually joining great rivers that would travel hundreds, even thousands of miles across North America. Water has always been one of history's quiet architects. It shapes mountains, it nourishes forests, it fills lakes and rivers, and without asking for recognition, it allows civilizations to grow. As we continue our peaceful journey westward, the mountains slowly begin to fall behind us. The air grows warmer. The forests become thinner. Wide valleys open before us, stretching toward distant horizons where the sky seems almost endless. Here, the landscape tells another remarkable story. Millions of years ago, powerful volcanic eruptions, ancient inland seas, enormous glaciers, and relentless winds shaped much of the American West. Every canyon, every cliff, every unusual rock formation became another page in a history book written not by people, but by nature itself. One of the greatest wonders waiting quietly beyond the mountains is Yellowstone. Long before it became America's first national park in 1872, indigenous peoples knew this extraordinary place well. They hunted here, gathered plants for medicine, and spoke with respect about the steaming springs, colorful pools, and towering geysers unlike anything found elsewhere on Earth. Imagine arriving there just after sunrise. Cool morning mist drifts above peaceful meadows where herds of bison graze slowly across the grass. The only sounds are birds welcoming the day and the gentle bubbling of distant hot springs. Then, without warning, a great column of steaming water rises toward the sky. Old Faithful has erupted once again. Visitors stand quietly. Nobody rushes. Nobody shouts. Everyone simply watches. For thousands of years, this remarkable geyser has repeated its patient rhythm, powered by heat deep beneath the Earth's surface. It reminds us that some of nature's greatest performances require no audience at all. Nearby, colorful hot springs shimmer beneath the morning light. Brilliant shades of blue, emerald green, golden orange, and deep red surround crystal-clear pools whose colors come from microscopic organisms thriving in warm, mineral-rich water. Scientists continue studying these remarkable life forms today because they help us better understand how life survives in extreme environments. Even in the smallest corners of nature, history continues to teach. As afternoon arrives, gentle breezes ripple across wide mountain meadows filled with wildflowers. A family of elk quietly drinks from a cool stream. Trumpeter swans glide gracefully across still lakes. Far away, a lone wolf pauses upon a rocky hillside before disappearing silently into the forest. The balance of life continues. Predators hunt, plants bloom, snow melts, rain falls, everything follows its own ancient rhythm. When Yellowstone became the world's first national park, it represented something truly remarkable. For one of the first times in history, a nation chose to protect an enormous landscape not because of gold, farmland, or timber, but simply because its natural beauty deserved to be preserved for future generations. It was a revolutionary idea: the mountains, the forests, the rivers, the wildlife. These treasures belong not only to one generation, but to every generation still to come. As evening slowly approaches, the setting sun bathes the landscape in soft golden light. Steam rises gently from the geyser basins. Pine forests cast long shadows across quiet meadows. The temperature begins to fall as another peaceful night prepares to embrace the wilderness. Campfires glow softly beneath towering trees. Travelers sit quietly together, sipping warm coffee while listening to the distant calls of coyotes echoing across the valleys. Above them stretches one of the darkest night skies in America. Without city lights, thousands upon thousands of stars shine with breathtaking brilliance. The Milky Way stretches from one horizon to the other like a river of light. For a long moment nobody speaks. There is nothing that needs to be said. Nature itself tells the story. A story millions of years older than any nation, older than every city, older than every road, railroad, or map. And as sleep gently approaches, the warm glow of the campfire slowly fades into glowing embers. The breeze grows softer. The forest becomes still. Somewhere nearby, a stream continues its endless song beneath the moonlight, just as it has for countless ages, just as it always will. Tonight, beneath the timeless sky of the American West, history and nature rest together in perfect silence, inviting every traveler to slow their thoughts, breathe deeply, and simply listen to the quiet heartbeat of the land. As dawn slowly returned to the western wilderness, the campfire had become little more than a bed of glowing embers. A faint ribbon of smoke drifted lazily upward through the cool morning air before disappearing among the towering pine trees. Somewhere nearby, a mountain stream continued its gentle conversation with smooth stones, just as it had every morning for thousands of years. Our journey now turns toward another landscape unlike any other in America. Far beyond the forests and alpine meadows, the land gradually becomes drier. Pine trees grow farther apart. The rivers become smaller. The air carries the warm scent of sun-baked earth and sagebrush. Before long, we arrive in the great deserts of the American Southwest. To someone seeing them for the first time, deserts may appear empty. But they are anything but empty. They are living worlds filled with quiet beauty, extraordinary resilience, and ancient history. As the morning sun climbs higher, golden light spreads across endless stretches of red sandstone, towering mesas, and graceful rock arches shaped patiently by wind and rain over millions of years. The silence is remarkable, not the silence of loneliness, the silence of balance, the kind of silence that allows every small sound to become meaningful. A gentle breeze brushes against dry grasses. A raven glides effortlessly through the clear blue sky. A lizard pauses upon a warm rock before disappearing into the shade. Every creature here has learned to conserve energy, respect water, and live in harmony with a demanding environment. Long before modern highways crossed these deserts, native nations such as the Navajo, Hopi, Zuni, Apache, and many others built communities that flourished in landscapes outsiders often believed impossible to inhabit. They understood where hidden springs emerged after winter rains. They cultivated corn, beans, squash, and cotton using remarkable knowledge of rainfall and soil. Stone villages stood upon high mesas, protected both from flooding and from extreme heat. Some homes built hundreds of years ago still stand today, a quiet reminder of careful craftsmanship and deep respect for the land. As the afternoon warmth settles across the desert, shadows slowly lengthen beneath towering saguaro cacti. Some of these remarkable giants have stood for more than 150 years, patiently, silently, watching generations come and go. Their broad arms stretch toward the brilliant sky like ancient guardians of the desert. Small birds build nests safely within their thick trunks. Bats visit their blossoms after sunset. Even in one of America's driest landscapes, life finds remarkable ways to flourish. Travelers crossing these deserts learned an important lesson: never rush. Water must be used wisely. The hottest hours of the day are often best spent resting beneath the shade of canyon walls or sturdy cottonwood trees growing beside precious streams. As evening approaches, the fierce sunlight softens into warm shades of orange, copper, and crimson. The sandstone cliffs begin to glow as though lit from within. Photographers today call this moment the golden hour. Long before cameras existed, people simply stood quietly and admired it. No painting could fully capture such beauty. No words could completely describe it. Only silence seemed appropriate. Soon the sun slips below the distant mesas. The desert cools surprisingly quickly. A pleasant breeze replaces the afternoon heat. The first stars begin to appear overhead, then another, and another. Within an hour, the heavens become almost impossibly bright. Because the desert air is so dry and clear, many of the darkest skis in the United States can still be found here today. The Milky Way shines like a river flowing across the night. Ancient travelers used these same stars to guide their journeys. Astronomers continue studying them with powerful telescopes. Children still lie upon warm blankets, looking upward with the same sense of wonder their ancestors felt centuries ago. Time changes many things. Wonder remains. Nearby, a small camp rests peacefully. A kettle warms quietly above glowing coals. Someone gently pours fresh coffee into a tin cup. Another traveler opens a well-worn journal, recording the day's journey in careful handwriting so future generations might one day understand what these quiet places felt like. Not simply what they looked like, but what they felt like: the stillness, the endless horizon, the fragrance of sage carried by the evening breeze, the profound peace that settles over the desert once darkness arrives. History often remembers famous cities, great inventions, and remarkable leaders. Yet places like this remind us that America has always been shaped just as deeply by its landscapes. Its deserts taught patience, its mountains taught endurance, its rivers taught connection, its forests taught humility. Each landscape quietly became a teacher to those willing to slow down and listen. As the night grows deeper, the campfire burns lower. The coyotes begin their distant evening songs. The stars continue their slow journey across the sky. And beneath that endless canopy of light, the great deserts of the American Southwest rest peacefully once again, keeping their ancient stories safe until another quiet dawn gently awakens the land. As the stars slowly faded above the quiet desert, the eastern horizon began to glow with the soft colors of another American sunrise. The cool air carried the fresh scent of sage after a peaceful night, and tiny drops of dew rested upon hardy desert grasses before disappearing beneath the first warm rays of light. Our journey now follows one of the oldest pathways in the American West. It is not a modern highway, not a railroad, not even a wagon road. It is a trail that countless generations walked long before maps gave it a name. For thousands of years, indigenous peoples crossed these valleys and deserts, carrying food, tools, pottery, woven blankets, medicines, and stories from one community to another. Every journey strengthened friendships between distant villages. Every traveler became a messenger, sharing news of changing seasons, successful harvests, and the movements of wildlife across the land. These ancient trade routes remind us of an important truth. Long before modern transportation connected America, people had already created remarkable networks of cooperation stretching across enormous distances. As the morning grows brighter, We arrive beside a quiet canyon. Its towering walls glow deep red beneath the rising sun. High above, swallows dart effortlessly through the clear blue sky. Far below, a narrow stream winds patiently between smooth stones polished by centuries of flowing water. If you stand very still, you can hear almost nothing. Only the breeze, the water, the distant call of a raven. Silence itself becomes part of the landscape. Many travelers who crossed the American West carried journals. Inside them, they described not only the places they visited, but also the emotions those places inspired. One wrote of feeling humbled by the endless sky. Another described the extraordinary stillness of the desert after sunset. A naturalist marveled at wildflowers blooming where almost no rain had fallen for months. Each journal preserved a small piece of history, not the history of governments or battles, but the history of wonder. As afternoon sunlight reaches the canyon floor, small desert flowers open their petals. Bright yellow brittlebush, purple desert verbena, tiny white evening primrose waiting patiently for sunset. Nature wastes nothing. Every bloom appears exactly when conditions are right. Every seed waits patiently for its moment. It is a quiet lesson in patience that deserts have taught for millions of years. Farther west, the landscape gradually begins to change once again. The dry earth slowly gives way to rolling foothills. The air becomes cooler. Oak trees appear beside winding streams. Then, almost unexpectedly, another remarkable sight unfolds before us: the Pacific Ocean. After traveling across forests, rivers, mountains, prairies, lakes, deserts, and valleys, we finally reach the western edge of the continent. The ocean stretches beyond the horizon without end. Gentle waves roll steadily toward the shore, each one following the last in an endless rhythm that has continued since long before human history began. Sea otters float peacefully upon beds of giant kelp. Pelicans glide only inches above the waves. Harbor seals rest quietly upon smooth rocks warmed by the afternoon sun. Offshore, migrating gray whales sometimes appear during their long seasonal journeys, traveling thousands of miles between Arctic feeding grounds and the warm lagoons of Mexico. Every year, they make the same remarkable voyage, generation after generation. Guided by instincts scientists are still working to fully understand. Along the coastline, towering redwood forests rise into the mist. Some of these extraordinary trees have stood for more than 2,000 years. Imagine everything they have witnessed: the rise and fall of civilizations, the arrival of explorers, the birth of a nation, the construction of railroads, the invention of electricity, the first automobiles, the first airplanes. Through it all, the redwoods simply continued growing a little taller every year, quietly, patiently, gracefully. As evening arrives, sunlight filters through the ancient forest in long golden beams. The air feels cool beneath the towering trees. Every footstep seems softer. Many visitors instinctively lower their voices here, as though entering a great cathedral built entirely by nature. Perhaps they are. When darkness finally settles across the Pacific coast, waves continue their gentle conversation with the shore. The towering redwood stands silently beneath a sky filled with stars. The breeze carries the fresh scent of saltwater and evergreen needles. Our long journey across America has revealed a nation shaped not only by remarkable people, but by extraordinary landscapes that have patiently watched history unfold for thousands of years. Every mountain, every river, every prairie, every desert, every forest, every coastline, together they form a living story that continues even now, quietly unfolding with every sunrise and every peaceful night. And as the moon casts its silver light across the endless Pacific, the ocean whispers the same timeless message it has carried for countless generations: slow down. Listen carefully. History is always speaking to those who are willing to hear its quiet voice. The gentle waves of the Pacific continued their endless rhythm throughout the night, rising and falling beneath a sky filled with countless stars. Long after the last lantern in the nearby village had gone dark, the ocean remained awake, quietly breathing against the shore just as it had for millions of years. Before dawn, a cool mist drifted inland from the sea. It wrapped itself around the towering redwood trees, whose trunks rose like enormous pillars into the darkness above. These giants were unlike almost any other living thing on Earth. Some stood more than 350 feet tall. Many had already been growing for over 1,000 years before the first Europeans reached North America. A few were already ancient when William the Conqueror ruled England in the 11th century. Imagine the history these trees have silently witnessed. Generations have come and gone beneath their branches. Entire nations have risen. Technologies have transformed the world. Yet each year the redwoods quietly added another thin ring beneath their bark, measuring time with remarkable patience. Walking through one of these forests early in the morning feels almost dreamlike. The air is cool and wonderfully fresh. Soft beams of sunlight slowly filter through the high canopy, creating gentle columns of golden light that drift across the forest floor. Ferns cover the ground in rich shades of emerald green. Tiny streams wind peacefully between moss-covered stones. Everything seems perfectly still. Scientists have discovered that these forests create their own unique environment. The cool coastal fog provides moisture even during the dry summer months. Some of the tallest trees actually collect water directly from the mist, allowing entire ecosystems to flourish beneath their branches. Nature quietly supports itself in remarkable ways. Birds awaken one by one. A Steller's jay calls from high above. A woodpecker begins tapping rhythmically against an old trunk. Somewhere deeper in the forest, a black-tailed deer steps carefully through the ferns before disappearing silently into the morning mist. Nothing here feels hurried. Every living creature moves with calm purpose. By mid-morning, sunlight finally reaches the forest floor. Travelers pause often, not because the trail is difficult, but because beauty invites reflection. Many early naturalists who visited these forests struggled to describe them. Words seemed too small. Photographs, they believed, could never fully capture the feeling of standing beneath trees taller than nearly every building in America. Some simply closed their notebooks and sat quietly instead. Sometimes silence is the most honest description. Beyond the forests, small coastal towns gradually developed. Lumber mills, fishing harbors, and quiet farms appeared beside sheltered bays. Life remained closely connected to nature. The ocean supplied fish. The forests supplied timber. The fertile valleys produced vegetables, fruit, and grain. Neighbors depended upon one another, sharing tools, knowledge, and time whenever help was needed. As afternoon sunlight softened, children explored tide pools left behind by the retreating ocean. Inside these shallow pools existed entire miniature worlds. Bright orange sea stars clung to smooth rocks. Tiny crabs hurried sideways between patches of seaweed. Sea anemones gently waved delicate tentacles beneath the clear water. Every tide revealed something new. Every visit offered another small discovery. Natural history often unfolds through quiet observation rather than dramatic events. A patient person notices details others miss: the shape of a shell, the pattern of bird tracks in wet sand, the slow opening of a wildflower, the changing direction of the wind before rain arrives. America's greatest explorers, scientists, and conservationists shared one important quality: they paid attention. As evening approaches once again, the Pacific sky becomes a masterpiece of color. Brilliant oranges gradually soften into gentle pinks. Lavender clouds drift above the horizon. The ocean reflects every changing shade until sea and sky seem almost impossible to separate. Fishing boats slowly return to the harbor. Smoke rises gently from cottage chimneys. Families gather for another peaceful supper prepared from the day's fresh harvest and the sea's generous gifts. Far offshore, the steady beam of a lighthouse begins another night's faithful work. Its light slowly turns across the dark water again, and again, and again. For generations, sailors have looked toward that familiar light with gratitude. It asks for no applause. It simply continues shining. Perhaps that is one of the quiet lessons woven throughout America's history. The greatest contributions are often made by those who faithfully perform ordinary tasks with extraordinary care. The teacher opening the schoolhouse each morning, the farmer tending fields through changing seasons, the lighthouse keeper trimming the lamp before sunset, the ranger protecting ancient forests. the parent reading a bedtime story beside a warm fire. History is built not only by famous names remembered in books, but also by millions of gentle acts of kindness, patience, and quiet dedication. And as another peaceful night settles over the Pacific coast, the waves continue their timeless conversation with the shore, while the ancient redwood stands silently beneath the stars, guarding the memories of a land that has always rewarded those willing to slow down, look closely, and simply listen. The night passed gently, and somewhere beyond the Pacific shoreline, the first hint of dawn slowly painted the eastern sky with soft shades of silver and pale blue. The ocean breeze grew quieter, and a peaceful calm settled over the coast before another day quietly began. Our journey now turns northward, following the rugged coastline where the sea meets cliffs shaped by countless centuries of wind and waves. Here, mornings often begin with fog, not heavy storms, not fierce winds, just a cool blanket of mist drifting silently across the water, wrapping rocky islands, evergreen forests, and quiet fishing villages in a gentle embrace. As the sun gradually climbs higher, the fog begins to lift. One hill appears, then another. Soon, entire forests of Douglas fir, western hemlock, and Sitka spruce emerge from the white mist, their towering branches glistening with tiny droplets of water. These forests are among the richest temperate rainforests in the world. Unlike tropical jungles, they are cool, peaceful places where moss hangs softly from ancient branches, and every fallen log slowly becomes the beginning of new life. Scientists sometimes call these nurse logs. A fallen tree, rather than marking an ending, quietly becomes home to young saplings, mushrooms, insects, birds, and countless tiny organisms. Even in nature, endings often become beginnings. The forest teaches this lesson without speaking a single word. Small streams flow gently beneath wooden bridges built decades ago. Salmon begin one of the most remarkable journeys in the natural world. After spending years in the Pacific Ocean, they somehow find their way back to the very rivers where they were born. Scientists continue studying exactly how they accomplish this extraordinary feat. Some believe they recognize the Earth's magnetic field. Others believe they remember the unique scent of their home streams. Perhaps it is a little of both. Whatever the answer, generation after generation, they return, patiently, faithfully. Along the riverbanks, black bears quietly wait during salmon season. They catch only what they need. The remains of their meals return valuable nutrients to the forest floor, feeding trees that may stand for hundreds of years. Nature wastes remarkably little. Everything is connected. The river nourishes the salmon nourish the forest protects the river, round and round the cycle continues. By late morning, sunlight filters through the trees, creating shimmering patterns across carpets of emerald moss. Tiny ferns uncurl delicate leaves toward the light. Bright red berries appear among green shrubs. A hummingbird pauses beside a wildflower for only a heartbeat before vanishing once again into the forest. Time seems wonderfully unimportant here. Nobody rushes. Nobody measures the hours too carefully. The forest follows an older clock. The changing seasons, the rising and setting sun, the slow growth of ancient trees. As afternoon arrives, our path reaches a quiet coastal overlook. Far below, waves gently wash against dark volcanic rocks. Sea stacks rise dramatically from the ocean, standing like lonely islands shaped entirely by wind, waves, and unimaginable stretches of time. Puffins rest upon rocky ledges. Sea lions stretch comfortably upon sun-warmed stones. Far offshore, a pod of orcas briefly surfaces before disappearing once more beneath the calm sea. The Pacific Northwest has always inspired artists, poets, photographers, and explorers. Many later wrote that these landscapes encouraged something increasingly rare in the modern world: stillness, not emptiness, but a peaceful stillness filled with quiet attention. As evening slowly returns, a gentle rain begins to fall, not a heavy storm, only a soft drizzle that fills the air with the rich fragrance of cedar, pine, and fresh earth. The rain barely disturbs the forest. It simply becomes another familiar visitor. The leaves welcome it. The streams grow slightly fuller. The moss shines even brighter beneath the fading light. Inside nearby homes, warm lamps glow softly through rain-covered windows. Families prepare simple evening meals, books rest upon wooden tables, children curl beneath comfortable blankets while grandparents quietly tell stories passed down through generations. Outside, the rain continues its patient song. Drop by drop, leaf by leaf, stone by stone, the forest listens. The ocean listens. The mountains listen. And perhaps, if we become quiet enough ourselves, we can hear something too, not words, but the timeless rhythm of a land that has never stopped teaching patience, gratitude, and wonder. As darkness gently settles once again across America's northwestern coast, the lighthouse begins another peaceful night of faithful service. Its warm beam turns slowly across the sea. The waves answer with their endless rhythm. The ancient forests breathe softly beneath the rain. And another calm page is added to the long, beautiful story of a nation whose greatest treasures have often been found not in noise, but in silence. Morning arrived once more, quietly and without announcement. The rain that had fallen through much of the night had washed every leaf until it shimmered beneath the first gentle rays of sunlight. Tiny drops of water clung to the needles of evergreen trees like strings of crystal beads, reflecting the soft, golden light of dawn. Our peaceful journey now turns inland again, following one of the most remarkable natural pathways in North America. It is easy to forget that before modern highways, rivers served as the continent's greatest roads. They asked for no paving. They required no bridges in many places. They simply flowed, patiently guiding travelers through forests, valleys, and open plains. Among these waterways, few were more important than the Missouri River. Stretching for more than 2,300 miles, it is the longest river in North America. Beginning high in the Rocky Mountains of present-day Montana, it winds through broad valleys and endless grasslands before finally joining the mighty Mississippi near present-day St. Louis. For countless generations, indigenous nations knew every bend of this remarkable river. They understood where the current ran swiftly. They knew where fish gathered during different seasons. They recognized safe places to cross and quiet stretches where families could camp beneath cottonwood trees. Knowledge of the river was not written in books. It lived in memory. Parents taught children. Grandparents guided grandchildren. Stories carried practical wisdom from one generation to the next. On this peaceful morning, imagine standing beside the Missouri. The water moves slowly but with quiet strength. Mist rises gently from its surface. A beaver swims silently across the river before disappearing into a lodge built with astonishing skill. Kingfishers dart low above the water. Great blue herons remain perfectly still, waiting with extraordinary patience for the right moment to catch breakfast. Nature wastes no movement. Every action has purpose. As the day grows warmer, flatboats drift downstream carrying flour, animal hides, handmade furniture, iron tools, and letters destined for settlements hundreds of miles away. The people aboard these boats move without hurry. Some quietly repair ropes. Others prepare a simple midday meal over a small cooking fire safely contained within the boat. A child sits near the bow watching turtles resting upon sunlit logs. To that child, every bend in the river reveals another small adventure. Perhaps a nesting eagle. Perhaps a family of deer drinking along the shoreline. Perhaps only another beautiful stretch of peaceful water. Sometimes, that is enough. The Missouri also became famous through one of America's greatest journeys of exploration. In the early 19th century, explorers followed much of its winding course while learning about landscapes that many Americans had never before seen. They carefully recorded plants, animals, rivers, mountains, and weather conditions in journals that remain valuable historical records today. But beyond the maps and scientific observations, those journals often reveal something quieter: wonder. Again and again, the writers paused simply to describe sunsets, birdsong, endless skis, and the kindness shown by people they met along the way. Curiosity shaped their journey as much as courage did. By afternoon, broad meadows stretch beside the river. Wildflowers sway gently in the breeze. Cottonwood leaves shimmer with every passing gust of wind, producing a soft rustling sound often compared to distant rainfall. Overhead, white clouds drift lazily across an endless blue sky. There is no rush. The river has flowed this way for thousands of years. It is in no hurry to reach the sea. As evening approaches, the colors begin to change once again. The western sky glows with warm amber light. The river reflects shades of orange, crimson, and deep violet. Campfires appear along quiet riverbanks where travelers prepare to rest for another peaceful night. Someone gently stirs a pot of vegetable stew. Fresh bread warms beside glowing coals. Nearby, a fiddle plays a slow, comforting melody while children grow sleepy beneath blankets spread upon the grass. The conversation gradually fades. One by one, voices become whispers, then silence. Only the steady murmur of the Missouri remains, the same sound heard centuries ago, the same sound heard today, the same sound that will likely continue long after every traveler has completed their own journey. History often celebrates destinations, the founding of cities, the completion of railroads, the signing of important documents. Yet rivers remind us that the journey itself may be the greater story. Every gentle bend, every quiet sunrise, every peaceful campsite beneath the stars. These ordinary moments become the memories that last the longest. And so, beneath another vast American sky filled with countless stars, the Missouri River continues its timeless journey eastward, patient, faithful, and quietly carrying the reflections of the moon toward tomorrow's dawn. The stars slowly faded as another peaceful dawn spread across the wide American landscape. A gentle breeze moved through the tall cottonwood trees lining the Missouri River, carrying with it the fresh scent of morning dew and damp earth. Somewhere in the distance, the cheerful call of a meadowlark welcomed another quiet day. Our journey now follows the changing seasons themselves. No invention has ever stopped them. No empire has ever controlled them. For thousands of years, spring has followed winter, summer has followed spring, autumn has followed summer, and winter has quietly returned once again. The seasons became America's oldest calendar. In the forests of New England, the first signs of spring often arrived with melting snow. Tiny streams that had slept beneath thick ice all winter began to sing once more. Maple trees awakened, their roots drawing fresh water from the warming ground. Families carefully collected maple sap, patiently boiling it for hours until it became rich golden syrup, a tradition that continues across parts of the United States and Canada today. Farther south, dogwood trees unfolded brilliant white blossoms. Wild violets appeared beside woodland paths. The forest slowly changed from shades of gray and brown into every imaginable color of green. Birds returned from long migrations. The familiar songs that had been absent throughout winter once again filled the morning air. Summer followed gently. Across the Great Plains, endless fields of prairie grass swayed beneath warm breezes. Thunderclouds occasionally gathered during late afternoons, towering high into the sky before releasing cooling rain upon thirsty fields. After every storm, rainbows stretched across the horizon, reminding travelers that calm often follows even the darkest clouds. In the Rocky Mountains, snow still rested upon the highest peaks while wildflowers covered lower valleys in brilliant colors. Crystal-clear streams rushed downhill, carrying fresh snowmelt toward rivers that nourished farms hundreds of miles away. Every landscape experienced summer differently, yet all were connected. When autumn arrived, America transformed once again. Apple orchards overflowed with ripe fruit. Pumpkin patches glowed bright orange beneath cool blue skies. Maple forests became masterpieces of crimson, amber, and gold. Families gathered for harvest festivals, celebrating another successful growing season with music, simple meals, and grateful hearts. Children eagerly collected colorful leaves, pressing their favorites between the pages of treasured books to preserve a little of autumn's beauty through the coming winter. Even the air felt different, cooler, crisper, filled with the scent of wood smoke drifting lazily from distant chimneys. Then came winter. The first snowfall often arrived quietly during the night. Morning revealed fields transformed into peaceful blankets of white. Every fence post wore a cap of fresh snow. Every evergreen branch carried delicate crystals that sparkled beneath the winter sun. The world seemed softer, quieter. Footsteps became muffled. Even familiar roads appeared entirely new. For many families, winter evenings became precious opportunities to gather together. Candles flickered gently upon wooden tables. Books were read aloud beside warm fireplaces. Grandparents shared stories remembered from decades earlier. Children listened while the wind whispered softly outside. There was comfort in these simple routines. The seasons taught patience. No winter lasted forever. No summer continued without end. Everything arrived in its proper time. Everything quietly passed before beginning once again. Perhaps this is why so many early American journals speak not only about places, but about seasons. Travelers remembered where they saw the first spring flowers, where they watched leaves fall like golden rain, where they experienced their deepest snowfall. Nature became part of memory itself. As our peaceful journey continues, evening slowly settles across the countryside once more. The setting sun casts long golden shadows across quiet fields. A flock of geese flies overhead in its familiar V-shaped formation, continuing a migration that countless generations of birds have completed long before humans understood the science behind it. Nearby, a small farmhouse glows warmly beneath the first evening stars. A lantern hangs beside the front door. Smoke rises gently from the chimney. Inside, another ordinary family prepares supper after another ordinary day. History may never record their names, yet their quiet lives became part of the great story of America just as surely as presidents, inventors, explorers, and famous leaders. Because history is not only made by extraordinary people, it is carried forward by millions of ordinary mornings, millions of peaceful evenings, millions of gentle acts of kindness repeated day after day, season after season. And as another calm night embraces the American landscape, the moon slowly rises above forests, rivers, mountains, and endless plains, shining with the same quiet light that has guided travelers, dreamers, and storytellers throughout every chapter of the nation's remarkable history. As the years quietly unfolded, America entered a new century. The 19th century gradually gave way to the 20th, not with a single dramatic moment, but with millions of ordinary sunrises that looked much like those that had come before. Farmers still walked into their fields before dawn. Fishermen still studied the tides. Teachers still opened classroom doors each morning, greeting children eager to learn. The country was changing, yet the comforting rhythm of everyday life remained surprisingly familiar. Small towns slowly welcomed electricity. For many families, the first electric light was unforgettable. For generations they had depended upon candles, oil lamps, and fireplaces. Then, one evening, with the gentle pull of a switch, warm light quietly filled an entire room. Children stared in amazement. Parents smiled with quiet gratitude. Simple moments often became history's most meaningful memories. Not long afterward, telephones began connecting neighbors separated by miles of countryside. Messages that once required days of travel could now be shared in only a few moments. Yet many people continued writing letters by hand. A handwritten letter carried something a telephone never could: the careful shape of familiar handwriting, the pause between sentences, the small details of daily life. Many families carefully saved these letters inside wooden boxes, passing them from one generation to another. As the years passed, automobiles gradually appeared along roads once traveled only by horses and wagons. The earliest cars moved slowly. Dust rose gently behind their narrow wheels as they crossed country roads lined with fences, orchards, and quiet farmhouses. Children often stopped playing simply to watch one pass. It was not speed that impressed them, it was possibility. America slowly became more connected than ever before. Railroads stretched farther. Roads improved. Bridges crossed rivers that had once delayed travelers for days. Yet even as technology advanced, the nation's greatest treasures remained remarkably unchanged. The Grand Canyon still welcomed every sunrise with breathtaking colors. The Great Lakes still reflected autumn forests each October. The Appalachian Mountains still gathered morning mist in their peaceful valleys. The Mississippi River continued its patient journey toward the Gulf. The redwood forests quietly reached higher into the sky. Nature kept its own timeless schedule. In 1872, Yellowstone had become the world's first national park. In the decades that followed, Americans continued protecting extraordinary landscapes for future generations. Yosemite, Sequoia, Mount Rainier Glacier, Grand Canyon, Great Smoky Mountains. Each park became a promise that beauty deserved protection, a promise that children yet unborn would someday stand beneath ancient trees, beside rushing rivers, or upon quiet mountain overlooks, feeling the same sense of wonder experienced by those who came before them. Visitors traveled from every corner of the nation. Some came seeking adventure, others simply wished to rest. Many discovered something unexpected: silence. The kind of silence that allows thoughts to slow. The kind that reminds us the world has always been far larger than our daily worries. As evening settled over the parks, campfires glowed softly beneath endless skies. Families shared stories. Friends quietly watched the stars appear. Children searched for constellations, while grandparents pointed toward the North Star, explaining how sailors and explorers had followed its faithful light for centuries. Those evenings became lifelong memories. Meanwhile, America continued welcoming people from around the world. Ships arrived carrying families who dreamed of peaceful homes, meaningful work, and brighter futures. They brought new languages, new recipes, new music, new traditions. Yet over time, they also shared something deeply American: the belief that tomorrow could always become better than today. Communities grew stronger because people from many different backgrounds contributed their own skills, hopes, and experiences. A baker from Italy, a carpenter from Sweden, a teacher from Ireland, a tailor from Poland, a farmer from Germany, a merchant from Greece. Together, ordinary people quietly helped shape the nation. History often celebrates famous inventors, presidents, explorers, and scientists. Their accomplishments certainly deserve remembrance, but every great achievement depended upon countless others: the workers who built schools, the nurses who comforted the sick, the librarians who preserved knowledge, the firefighters who protected neighborhoods, the farmers who provided food, the parents who taught kindness. These quieter contributions rarely appeared in newspapers, yet they formed the true foundation of American life. As another peaceful evening settled across the country, city lights shimmered gently along distant streets while quiet farms rested beneath moonlit skies. The same moon reflected upon the Atlantic Ocean, the Great Lakes, the Mississippi River, the deserts of Arizona, the forests of Oregon, the snowy peaks of Colorado. It connected every landscape we have visited together into one peaceful picture. Perhaps that has always been the quiet beauty of America. Its greatness has never belonged only to its largest cities or most famous moments. It has also belonged to forgotten villages, winding rivers, quiet forests, faithful lighthouse keepers, patient farmers, curious children, gentle teachers, and ordinary families whose simple lives quietly shaped history one peaceful day at a time. Tonight, as our long journey slowly approaches its final chapters, the stars once again shine above the nation just as they always have. They watched indigenous nations care for these lands. They watched explorers cross unfamiliar mountains. They watched rivers carry canoes and steamboats. They watched railroads stretch toward the western horizon. They watched cities rise while forests continued growing. And through every chapter, they remained silent witnesses, reminding us that history is not only a collection of dates and names. It is a collection of lives, of mornings, of sunsets, of quiet hopes shared by ordinary people whose kindness and perseverance continue to echo gently across the generations. As another peaceful night gave way to dawn, the first golden light spread gently across the American landscape. It touched the rocky shores of Maine, the rolling hills of Vermont, the fertile fields of Iowa, the towering peaks of Colorado, the endless deserts of Arizona, and finally the quiet waves of the Pacific Ocean. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the entire nation awakened together. Birds greeted the morning from forests that had stood for centuries. Small fishing boats slipped quietly away from sleepy harbors. Ranchers opened wooden gates before leading cattle toward open pasture. Bakery ovens warmed the streets of small towns with the comforting aroma of fresh bread. School bells prepared to welcome another generation of curious minds. History continued, not through dramatic headlines, but through millions of simple routines repeated with care. Every ordinary day quietly became extraordinary when viewed through the passage of time. As the 20th century continued, Americans experienced moments of celebration, hardship, innovation, and change. Airplanes carried travelers farther than anyone had imagined only decades earlier. National parks welcomed millions of visitors eager to experience mountains, forests, rivers, and deserts protected for future generations. Libraries expanded across cities and towns, making knowledge available to more people than ever before. Public schools grew stronger, opening doors to children from every background. Scientific discoveries improved medicine, agriculture, transportation, and communication. Yet despite remarkable progress, many timeless traditions remained beautifully unchanged. Families still gathered around dinner tables each evening. Neighbors still waved from front porches. Children still climbed trees, skipped stones across rivers, and chased butterflies through summer fields. Autumn still painted forests with brilliant colors. Winter still covered quiet farms beneath blankets of snow. Spring still filled orchards with blossoms. Summer still welcomed long evenings beneath glowing sunsets. Nature quietly reminded everyone that some rhythms never need improving. Across the Great Plains, wheat continued swaying beneath endless skies. The Appalachian Mountains still gathered morning mist along peaceful valleys. The mighty Mississippi River still carried fresh water toward the Gulf, just as it had for thousands upon thousands of years. On the Pacific coast, lighthouse beams continued turning through darkness, guiding ships safely home. In the Rocky Mountains, streams still rushed over ancient stones polished by countless generations of flowing water. The landscapes remained faithful companions to history, patient, enduring, always present. As evening approached, imagine standing once more beneath one of those vast American skis. Perhaps you are sitting beside a quiet lake where the water reflects the first evening stars. Perhaps you are resting beneath an ancient oak tree whose branches have sheltered travelers for centuries. Perhaps you are listening to the gentle rhythm of ocean waves, the whisper of prairie grass, or the peaceful murmur of a mountain stream. Wherever you are, one truth quietly reveals itself. History is not only found inside museums. It lives within landscapes, within rivers that never stop flowing, within forests that continue growing, within families who pass stories from one generation to the next, within traditions carried not by governments, but by ordinary people who choose kindness, patience, curiosity, and hope. Think for a moment about everyone who has crossed these lands, the indigenous nations who first understood the rhythms of nature, the explorers who carefully mapped unfamiliar rivers, the settlers who built homes from timber they shaped by hand, the teachers who patiently taught children to read, the nurses who cared for neighbors during difficult times, the railroad workers whose steady hands connected distant communities, the lighthouse keepers who faithfully trimmed lamps before sunset every evening, the park rangers who quietly protected America's natural treasures, the farmers who planted seeds they might never personally harvest. Each life became one small thread. Together, those threads formed the remarkable tapestry of American history, not perfect, not simple, but deeply human. And perhaps that is why studying history brings such quiet comfort. It reminds us that every generation faces uncertainty. Every generation works toward a better tomorrow. Every generation leaves behind lessons for those who follow. Now, as darkness gently settles across forests, mountains, rivers, deserts, and coastlines, countless stars appear overhead exactly as they have for thousands of years. They shine above New York's busy skyline. They shine above lonely prairie roads. They shine above peaceful cabins hidden deep within evergreen forests. They shine above quiet fishing villages along the Atlantic and Pacific. They shine above children dreaming peacefully beneath warm blankets. They shine above grandparents remembering stories from long ago. The stars ask nothing from us. They simply remind us to pause, to breathe slowly, to appreciate the quiet beauty surrounding ordinary life. And so our long journey through America's landscapes and history begins to draw peacefully toward its end. The campfires slowly fade into glowing embers. The rivers continue flowing through the darkness. The forests whisper softly in the evening breeze. The ocean carries gentle waves toward the shore. Somewhere in the distance, an old train whistle echoes briefly across the night before disappearing into silence. Everything grows calm. Everything grows still. The land that has carried countless generations now prepares for another sunrise. And as sleep gently approaches, history itself seems to whisper one final lesson. Great civilizations are remembered not only for the monuments they build, but also for the quiet lives of ordinary people who fill those monuments with meaning. So close your eyes. Listen to the wind moving gently through ancient trees. Listen to the distant river following its timeless path. Listen to the quiet heartbeat of a continent that has patiently carried millions of dreams across countless generations. Tomorrow, the sun will rise once again. The rivers will continue flowing. The mountains will continue standing. The forests will continue growing. And America's story, like the stars above it, will quietly continue into another peaceful night. The night had become wonderfully quiet. The last campfire had faded into a bed of glowing embers, and above the sleeping landscape, countless stars stretched from one horizon to the other. Somewhere far away, a gentle breeze moved through tall pine trees. Somewhere else, waves rolled softly against a distant shoreline. A slow river reflected the moonlight as faithfully as it had reflected the sun only hours before. Our long journey across America now reaches its final peaceful moments. Imagine looking down upon the continent from high above. To the east, the Atlantic Ocean greets another sunrise, just as it has for thousands of years. Along the rocky coast of Maine, fishing boats quietly prepare for another ordinary day. Farther south, the sandy beaches of the Carolinas welcome the steady rhythm of gentle waves. The Great Chesapeake Bay reflects the soft morning light, while waterfowl begin another migration across the changing seasons. Moving westward, the Appalachian Mountains remain wrapped in delicate morning mist. Ancient forests awaken slowly. Black bears quietly wander through wooded valleys. White-tailed deer pause beside cool mountain streams. Wildflowers bloom beneath towering oaks whose roots have held the hillsides together for centuries. Beyond them stretch peaceful farms, orchards, and villages where generations have worked the same fertile land with patience and gratitude. The Great Lakes shimmer beneath the morning sun: Superior, Michigan; Huron, Erie, Ontario. Together they contain nearly one-fifth of the world's surface fresh water, quietly reminding us how generous nature has been to this remarkable land. Their shores have welcomed indigenous communities, explorers, merchants, lighthouse keepers, sailors, scientists, and families seeking peaceful homes. Each generation added another chapter without ever changing the quiet rhythm of the waves themselves. The Mississippi continues its timeless journey southward. The Missouri faithfully joins it. Ohio, Arkansas, Tennessee, and countless smaller rivers contribute their waters without seeking recognition. Every stream matters. Every drop eventually becomes part of something much larger. History often works the same way: small acts of kindness, small discoveries, small moments of courage. Together they shape entire civilizations. Farther west, the endless Great Plains continue dancing beneath the wind. Prairie grasses bend gently toward the horizon. Bison once crossed these lands in astonishing numbers. Today, protected herds once again roam portions of their ancient home, reminding us that careful conservation can restore treasures once thought nearly lost forever. The Rocky Mountains still rise proudly toward the sky. Their snow feeds rivers. Their forests shelter wildlife. Their valleys welcome visitors seeking quiet reflection more than excitement. Beyond them lie the deserts, beautiful, patient, enduring. Places where every drop of rain becomes precious, and every sunrise paints sandstone cliffs with breathtaking colors impossible to forget. Finally, the Pacific Ocean stretches endlessly toward Asia, carrying with it gentle waves that have crossed thousands of miles before reaching America's western shore. Its tides continue arriving exactly on time, not because someone commands them, but because nature quietly follows laws far older than any nation. As evening slowly returns one final time, lights begin appearing across the continent. A porch lamp glows beside a farmhouse. A lighthouse shines across dark water. A ranger station welcomes weary travelers. A family gathers around a dinner table, children laugh. Grandparents tell familiar stories. Someone quietly reads a favorite book beside a warm fireplace. Someone else looks upward through a bedroom window, wondering about the stars. These peaceful moments rarely appear in history books, yet they are history. History is not only made by famous names. It is created every day by ordinary people choosing to work honestly, care for their families, help neighbors, protect nature, teach children, preserve traditions, and leave the world slightly better than they found it. That quiet truth has echoed throughout every chapter of our journey, from the first indigenous nations who respectfully cared for the land, to the explorers who carefully mapped unfamiliar rivers, to lighthouse keepers faithfully tending their lamps, to farmers patiently waiting for each harvest, to teachers opening classroom doors every autumn, to park rangers protecting ancient forests, to scientists studying rivers, mountains, wildlife, and stars. Each person contributed one small piece to a story still being written today. Now the moon rises higher, the forests become still, the rivers continue flowing, the wind whispers softly across the prairie, the waves breathe gently upon both oceans. The stars remain exactly where generations before us once found them. And perhaps that is the greatest comfort history can offer. Empires change, cities grow, technology advances, but the sunrise still arrives each morning. The seasons still follow one another. The rivers still seek the sea. The mountains still stand patiently beneath the sky. Nature quietly reminds us that while human history is always changing, the earth itself continues offering peace, beauty, and hope to every new generation. So as this long journey finally comes to rest, allow your thoughts to drift as gently as the Missouri River, as peacefully as the Atlantic tide, as steadily as the whispering prairie wind, as quietly as snow falling upon the Rocky Mountains, as softly as fog settling among the ancient redwoods. May the stories of the past remind you not only of where America has been, but also of the timeless values carried forward by ordinary people: kindness, curiosity, perseverance, gratitude, and hope. The stars slowly continue their silent journey across the heavens. The first birds will soon welcome another dawn. History will continue, nature will continue, and somewhere beneath that endless American sky, another peaceful story is already waiting to be told. Good night.